And now for our final speaker, who unfortunately, due to circumstances, could not be here with us physically, but he is online in Kiev. This is Yuri Shelyazhenko, the leader of peace movement in Ukraine, council member of the International Peace Bureau and War Resisters International, board member of European Bureau for Conscientious Objection, and of the World Beyond War. He holds a PhD in philosophy of law, as well as an MA in mediation and conflict management. His paper today is titled "What Ukraine Could Learn from Slovenia's Culture of Peace." Yuri, are you with us?
Okay, dear friends, are you hearing me? Greetings from Kiev, capital of Ukraine. My name is Yuri Shelyazhenko, and I will present to you results of unfinished comparative study of culture of peace and peace movements in Ukraine and Slovenia. To say very simply, this study attempts to explain and draw transformative lessons from cultural differences, because of which Slovenia had only 10 days long war for independence, while Ukraine is forced to fight years and years in this steadily turns into an endless war. This study is still not finished because I had limited time to work on it. My research in a way became a victim of two overwhelming circumstances. Firstly, it is a brutal Russian aggression, which continues from 2014. It reached peak cruelty after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, took more than 500,000 lives, destroyed our cities, and devastated our economy. There are regular air raid alerts because of bombings and attacks of Russian killer drones, and cold shelter in nearest underground parking is not the best place to do academic research. Vernadsky National Scientific Library in Kiev shortened working day, and during these air raids, readers were required to live and hide in subway station nearby called Dimiivska. Second obstacle to my studies was a lot of urgent work related to peace movement in Ukraine and international peace movement. Many people throughout the world wants to see a peace voice from Ukraine, and there is not many, so also it is a widespread hostility to peace movement induced by belligerent media and systemic human rights violations under martial law in Ukraine. You probably saw this report about military people stuffing someone at the street in a minibus and transporting to military recruitment stations against their will. You probably saw reports in the media how people are swimming across rivers, frozen in mountains, trying to escape conscription in Ukraine and so on. I started to organize peace movement in Ukraine in 2019 in spare time of lecturing on legal theory and history in Krok University in Kiev, and finishing in that time my PhD thesis. I managed to conduct several studies on peace and law and present these studies on a national roundtable of Ukrainian Academy of Legal Sciences. But unfortunately, when last summer I came to vice rector with a research proposal to study the legal foundations of peace, nonviolence, and conscientious objection to military service, in a month, my alma mater, where I studied law and mediation, where I defended my PhD in jurisprudence, decided to cease my employment contract without any explanations. Later, I learned that this coincided with secret criminal proceedings opened against me by the Security Service of Ukraine because of my human rights activism. 9 investigators under supervision of 5 prosecutors conducted surveillance against me, contacted my university, my bank, my mobile operator. This August searched my home, seized my computer and smartphone. They just took my stuff. By the way, a week ago, the court decided that investigator took my property illegally and must return it to me. But it is one of rare good decisions, which I feel hardly going to be implemented. Mostly judges lack powers and lack of willing to stop human rights violations of security service, which lacks democratic accountability to parliament or any human rights institution. So I got a formal suspicion in so-called justification of Russian aggression in a document, Peace Agenda for Ukraine and the World, which was sent to President Zelensky, and it is utter absurd that a pacifist is persecuted for so-called justification of aggression in anti-war statement, which clearly and unequivocally condemns Russian aggression. It condemns it, but somehow they decided it justifies it, just because it contains a call for peace. And this absurdity is only a pretext because documents disclosed to me shows that security service considers my advocacy of human right to conscientious objection to military service and legal aid which I provided to conscientious objectors as a threat to national security of Ukraine. I am still under night house arrest and forced to work a lot on my own legal defense because lawyers in Ukraine, I hired 2 brave lawyers. They mostly don't have courage and don't have a clue how to deal with politically motivated repressions under martial law. While some objectors are jailed now for 3 years for alleged crime of draft evasion, their conscientious objection ignored, they are denied. If repressions in my case will go further, I hope not, I'm working on it. But if it happened, I could be imprisoned for up to 5 years with confiscation of property. Such political repressions, to my knowledge, don't happen in Slovenia today. Last persecutions against peace activists was conducted by Yugoslavian army and security service. Sorry that I must illustrate differences between Ukraine and Slovenia on such sad personal example, but I hope you understand why my research is far from finishing. And I am grateful to friends, I am grateful to colleagues across the world for support in such hard circumstances. And I am also deeply grateful to the Peace Institute, to the Institute of Culture and Memory Studies, and personally to Brankica Petkovic and Dr. Martin Pogachar for the opportunity to present my study on this timely conference and for their insightful comments on my abstract. Now I will share my screen with slides. One moment, I will do it. Do you see my slides? I hope my slides are seen properly. So I will start from discussing what is culture of peace. I will explain shortly main pillars of the culture of peace in Ukraine and Slovenia. I will proceed with case studies of conflict analysis in late modern national struggles for independence in Ukraine and Slovenia, and I will finish with conclusion, which will be some lessons for Ukraine and for the world. A lot was said about definitions on this conference, and I mostly agree with all previous speakers, but in my studies, I developed this definition. which is based on several legal documents and also in studies of institutional pillars of peace by International Institute of Peace and Economics. So I understand peace as a dynamics of life free from violence, and violence is doing harm. So peace is when all needs are respected and nobody have a need to suffer or harm other people or environment. And culture of peace is constituted by practices and visions of nonviolent way of life, including nonviolent governance, nonviolent management, nonviolent conflict resolution, nonviolent communication, and so on. By the way, talking about visions, at this slide, you see this peace agenda for Ukraine and the world. At the website of International Peace Bureau, you could read it. It is exactly the document which allegedly justifies Russian aggression, and in fact, it is not. It is condemning Russian aggression, and it is about seeking peaceful ways to resist Russian aggression and to achieve peace in the world by peaceful means. And main fields in which peace is always sustained, because some people think that during the war peace somehow vanish. They think that during the war peace is gone. It is not. There is always more peace in life than violence. Violence is very specific attitude. It is intentional doing harm, and peace usually exists as a structural background of any process. And in social life, we could see in civil society, which in everyday dialogue, by the way, even in non-democratic regimes, some structures of civil society could be autonomous, opposing oppression of non-democratic regime, and persist in this dynamics of peaceful life. It is amazing how peace survive in even very dire circumstances. This is, of course, field of education. Knowledge is passed from generation to generation, how to live in peace. Like, for example, during centuries, families in Russia and in Ukraine, after conscription was introduced in Ukraine by Russian imperial tyranny, families used to evade draft. And we see that today in Russia, hundreds of thousands of people evade Putin's military draft to this aggression. And in Ukraine too, hundreds of thousands of people, according to a statement of Deputy Minister of Defense, avoid draft. So even such basic thing as popular knowledge, experience, and family stories sustain some culture of peace. But talking about formal education, it is of course more than that, because formal education could pass from generation to generations basics of positive peace. How to resolve conflicts without violence, how to resist violence without violence. We need to resist violence without violence to preserve a hope for the world with lesser or even no violence, world without wars. Of course, the media, their role in building dialogue in society, seeking common ground, seeking truth, because disinformation divides people and truth unites people. media is a field of peace building, and very important field of peace building is justice. All institutions of justice, both formal justice in governance and informal justice, structures of mediation, of everyday public dialogue, because most of conflicts in developed societies are not coming to court. Even if conflict is formalized, arise from contract, for example, most of disputes are resolved independently by negotiations or with intermediate like mediator. I was trained to be mediator. It is very interesting experience. Justice could be achieved mostly in voluntary, non-coercive, non-violent way. And we need to develop a formal system of justice to embrace this reconciliatory basis of justice. So this is main peace sustaining fields. And talking about normative aspect of culture of peace, I would refer to such sources of international law like Charter of the United Nations, Universal Declaration on Human Rights, and this declaration was empowered by several binding treaties like International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, European Convention for Human Rights, of course, and we know how European Court for Human Rights done a lot to make some uniformity and quality in European legal system. It is international humanitarian law. When I summarized what is culture of peace and what are main pillars of peace, I mostly based it on Declaration on the Culture of Peace, but it is very detailed. And if you like to understand better culture of peace, you should really read this Declaration on the Culture of Peace adopted by United Nations General Assembly in 1999. It contains very detailed definition in Article 1. It includes a lot of prerequisites like gender equality, like peaceful settlement of conflicts, adherence to international law, promotion of democracy, and so on. And articles from 4 to 9 says about the role of education, governments, media, civil society, parents, teachers, politicians, of course, United Nations in strengthening culture of peace. So it is very comprehensive document. And also there is a declaration on the right to peace. It is a very important moment when the humankind recognizes that peace is indeed human right. But in international documents regarding peace, you usually could find some things like sovereignty, and in legal textbooks, at least what I studied, talking about sovereignty, scholars are talking mostly about ability of the state to coerce, to apply violence legally. So we see here a lack of understanding that legal application of violence means necessity to change, to transform, to minimize this scope of violence. So culture of peace is not only about minimizing violence by subordinating it to law, but also by profound transformation from fight to dialogue, from militarized sovereignty to fair and inclusive public service, from some territorial integrity with barbed wire on borders and gunmen shooting migrants to social and environmental harmony, and from desperation and decline to hope and sustainable development. So this is about what is a culture of peace. Now, shortly, as I said, my study is not finished. What I found amazing things in Slovenia. I love your national anthem. It is amazing. Zdravljica, you know, even its formal, its form of like a toast for health. It is very life affirming and peaceful, and this words "Let's all the nations thrive," which you could find at this peace memorial in Brussels on the slide. The quarrel will be banished from the world. No more shall foes but neighbors be. It is what Ukrainian anthem lacks a lot. So I envy Slovenia national anthem. Human rights and peace education. I found that it is embedded into formal education, which is good. In Ukraine, we have lesser level of formal integration of these values and knowledge in formal education. In Constitution of Slovenia, I found human right to conscientious objection and peaceful politics, non-aggression, promotion of peace in international relations. It is what should be constitutional foundations of peaceful politics in any state. Of course, Costa Rica managed to prohibit creation of army by constitution, but perfection is something rarely happening in real world. So of course, nor Ukraine nor Slovenia is Costa Rica, but we could envy Costa Rica. Anyway, history of peace. To say fairly, I only started to study Slovenian history and analyze it using method of describing particularly history of peace, but what I already found, it is old ethnic, including linguistic and symbolic, and Christian, for example, moral, ethical, like this 10 commandments, you shall not kill, and so on, notions of peace. Of course, people in Slovenia participated in peace movements all the time when peace movements arrived. For example, Aloysia Stebi ran Ljubljana branch of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in 1920s. And there was Ljubljana Peace Movement Working Group section of War Resisters International in 1980s, 1990s with very ambitious goal to adapt politics of civilian defense in future independent Slovenia. And the state supporting peace research, the Peace Institute as institution commemorating and developing a culture of peace, it is very important elements of Slovenian culture of peace, which Ukraine unfortunately not have such. Culture of peace in Ukraine. What we have? Well, in Ukraine, we have some elements of understanding of peace by peaceful means, but mostly when people are talking about peace, not on interpersonal or intra-societal level, they mostly think about strong army. It is archaic vision. still this just war, this peace through strength, it is archaic vision of peace, which should be transformed with development of society, but still it is some sort of vision of peace. We have civic education, including some elements of human rights education, but mostly informal. And in Ukraine, human rights defenders openly say that interests of the state, national security is more important than human rights. So some basic understanding of necessity to defend some basic human rights, even in time when national security is at stake, unfortunately is not very strong. And military patriotic education, shooting ranges in schools, preparation of people to military service from teenagers. This is how in Ukraine we see preparation of future generations for so-called peace. We have some constitutional foundations of peace. For example, Constitution of Ukraine contains provisions regarding peaceful international relations, and there is Article 35, which guarantees replacement of military service with alternative non-military service, but this article now is not working. Army just denies applicability of this article in time of war, and despite Ukraine is party to several international treaties which demands respect to conscientious objection in time of war, nobody could change, or even nobody except of our small organization dare to challenge this human rights nihilism of Ukrainian army. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, formulated his famous formula of peace. It is formulated in a way indeed compliant with United Nations Charter, but it is a bit maximalist, and it contains some elements which are not explained clearly. For example, it contains reference to Kiev Security Compact, and when you open this Kiev Security Compact, you will see that it demands weapon supplies, Western weapon supplies to Ukraine during decades, and it demands turning all population of Ukraine into soldiers. This is how many people in Ukraine see peace, and that's how in Ukraine rating of trust in army is more than 90%. So it is higher than trust to Putin in Russia. People just turn blind into problems of militarism, like said abductions of people on streets for coercive military service. So this formula of peace, it is about defeat of enemy, and by the way, Ukrainian anthem says our enemies will perish, so it is quite traditional approach, and basically this so-called formula of peace about strong army. Ukraine have long, and I studied it a lot, history of peace. It includes ancient and modern visions of all human brotherhood and sisterhood. For example, at this slide, at the top, you see this man with beard. It is ancient, to say precisely, medieval Kievan Rus ruler Yaroslav the Wise, and small Cyrillic letters on the bottom is quote, if you will be live in love among each other, God will be with you. And original quote says not only live in love, but in love and peace. And someone erased peace from here, but this quote indeed about the peace. By the way, it is on Ukrainian money, but this it is one of cheapest money bills. So wiseness and peace-loving approach is not very treasured. Ukrainian history of peace includes anti-militarist and civil disobedient approach of Ukrainian dissidents under Russian Empire. For example, famous Ukrainian educator Mikhailo Dragomanov published a collection of anti-war folk songs gathered at ethnographic expeditions. He can't publish it in Ukraine under Russian Empire. He went to Geneva to publish it, and there were indeed anti-war and anti-conscription songs. Conscription under Russian Empire in Ukraine was to 10 years. And famous Ukrainian writer Taras Shevchenko was conscripted as repression to his criticism of Russian imperial rule. Okay, I see some notes to wrap up. Challenges also, I must say that we had important democratic transformations through nonviolent revolutions in 1990 and in 2004. We got rid of nuclear weapons in 1990s, and after the start of Russian aggression in 2014 and full-scale invasion in 2022, there was amazing examples of unarmed resistance, like, for example, when people gathered crowds and resisted Russian invasion. This file is more detailed description of Ukrainian culture of peace from ancient times till today, and probably I will not unpack it. I just will suggest to see on YouTube a video called Peaceful History of Ukraine. It explains Ukrainian history of peace. Now to case study. So returning to the question why Slovenia had only 10 days long war for independence while Ukraine is forced to fight endless war of independence from Russia. And of course, formal declaration of independence in 1991 went for Ukraine without war with Russia, just because Ukraine remained in Russian sphere of influence. When Ukraine made independent choice to join the Western nations, after this independent choice of Ukraine, Russia aggressively asserted ambitions to dominate in Ukrainian politics, and the war erupted, which already continues near 10 years. So 10 days of Yugoslavian aggression against Slovenia versus 10 years of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Why? Explanation is different levels of culture of peace, because Slovenia is very far ahead of Ukraine. In Slovenia, a strong peace movement throughout the 1980s insisted on a fair peace process, which ended the 10-day war in 1991, and perhaps prevented even border disputes becoming a pretext for a long bloodshed being referred to arbitration. If only Ukraine and Russia could refer to arbitration, painful matters of ethnic discrimination and contested territories. Peace comes from adhering to agreements and the ability to preserve common sense, to think, to self-restraint. Ukrainian formula of peace, invented and promoted by President Zelensky, indeed is more about killing all enemies, which is utopia, and turning all Ukrainians into soldiers, which is utopia, instead of seeking realistic ways how to defend our interests with minimum violence and with maximum common sense. I will illustrate necessity of common sense on example of philosophers and public intellectuals. While Ukrainian philosophers theorize collective punishment of all Russians for aggression against Ukraine, famous Slovenian thinker Slavoj Žižek condemns Russian aggression and refuses to treat all Russians as enemies. I totally agree with him here, as well as with his support of Middle East peace process. It is very courageous in such media environment. But by the way, I disagree with Zizek's old article in Guardian on Ukraine. I think when he promoted NATO as solution, he don't understand that military-industrial complex, military-focused geopolitics and geoeconomics is central to the cruelty of non-democratic capitalism. Getting rid of militarism is a necessary condition of true social and environmental justice. Sad that many progressives and leftists don't understand that, taking for granted without critical thinking and academic research a militarized organization of contemporary nation states. They even have illusions that violence in class struggle could change the world. I think only non-violent revolution, universally simultaneous in every corner of the world could do that. Big changes are needed to stop the war machine, which pushes and incentivizes people on all levels, from heads of state to average citizens, to do dumb and cruel radical things. It is easy to mark those who didn't stop, didn't listen to their conscience, criminals or even enemies, but it is madness to expect to kill or imprison all of them. The system must be changed. Not only regimes, the system must be changed in the first place. If Putin be removed, someone else with the same system will do the same aggressions. The system must be changed, military system in the first place, and system must be changed non-violently, because any ambitions of violent changes adds to the systemic violence and cements it. Systemic violence, the militarism, is the most problematic, the core of evil in capitalism. If Zizek thinks about common good, he should not downplay risks of militarist politics, NATO and military-industrial complex, which prevents universal disarmament and generates all these wars. But this mistake of Zizek, who criticized capitalism while ready to embrace its core evil machinery of mass killing, militarism, looks tiny and moderate, contrasting to calls of Ukrainian mainstream public intellectuals in style of Russia delend est, Russia should be destroyed. They knew that prolonged war, but they claim this propaganda will bring victory. I doubt it. Top Ukrainian General Zaluzhny admitted that the war is stalemate, and this stalemate, as I said, taken more than 500,000 lives. But enormous losses on the battlefield have changed attitudes in Moscow and Kiev to fight, not just for months, but for years and years. The irony is that ambitions plans to win in the indefinite future war, everyday losses, it causes everyday losses in a cruel, irrational war of attrition. Corpses are buried in trenches. Endless graveyards of fallen heroes will make questionable any value of victory. if someone even dare to celebrate such victory after tragic mess. It is said that it is forbidden to seek peace, that peace activists are persecuted, and that propaganda of war became the state ideology. Intellectuals are mobilized to serve it and punished for any doubts. Just one example. For long years, Jürgen Habermas was an icon for Ukrainian philosophers. But now, after his moderate advocacy of peace talks, they have turned the academic journal Philosophical Thought into a quarterly exercise of pamphleteering, which should be called more correctly Philosophical Thought against Habermas. They attacks this philosopher in almost every article. Structural, existential, fundamentalist militarism poisons our minds and our everyday lives. The hate consumes. Even pro-war thinkers can't ignore this. Miroslav Marinovich, vice rector of Catholic University in Lviv, quite realistically quipped that there will never be a ditch with crocodiles between Ukraine and Russia. A bit of common sense, unexpected, but I respect it. Sergei Datsuk warned quite rightly that the war will never end if people will continue to refuse to think and transform, because the war is exactly how you deal with conflicts without thinking. Any war is dumb indeed, and we need voices of common sense. To conclude my presentation, of course, voices of common sense are punishable. Talking to Time magazine about the unrealistic military goals of President Zelensky, a member of his team preferred to be anonymous. And after the publication, some of functionaries said security service should expose and punish those who don't believe in victory. But there are scientific methods of analysis of conflict escalation. I will not talk detailed it. My time is almost over. You could find this analysis on website of German peace magazine Friedenwissenschaft. When we are modeling, analyzing how this conflict fallen from peace to war on the escalation ladder, we could also imagine a de-escalation ladder. And de-escalation ladder, of course, starts from refusal to kill. Refusal to kill, which is protected well in Slovenian law, and I envy it, but not protected well in Ukrainian law. And this is one of the main problems we face. So, to conclude, there are many common things between culture of peace in Ukraine and Slovenia. Euro-Atlantic choice, ethnic, Slavic and Christian roots of peace in language, in spirituality. By the way, the word peace is very similar in Slovenian, in Russian, in Ukrainian. It is like just mir. Mir in Ukrainian, mir in Russian. Very similar to Hebrew shalom and Arabic salam. This should be inspiration to seek peace, and even the language provides you some traditional inspiration to seek common ground. Values of democratic peace common in culture of peace in Ukraine and Slovenia. Respect to international law and human rights, developed civil society, history of participation in peace movements. Both Ukrainian and Slovenian famous intellectuals, politicians participated in Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, in War Resisters International, and so on. But there are striking differences. And this is in Slovenian culture, strong legal safeguards of peace, philosophy of peace. In Ukraine, it is radical militarism, including utopia of turning nation into army. what I suggest lessons for Ukraine from Slovenia. We need to strengthen or introduce a new constitutional foundations of peace, to commemorate properly Ukrainian history of peace, to develop peace and human rights education, to protect human right to conscientious objection to military service, as Ukraine committed but not stick to commitments. Ideally, abolish conscription. Use participative democratic procedure to decide on collective security arrangements, strengthen democratic civilian control over defense and security sectors, and by the way, introduce a code of military ethics. Also, some lessons for the world from this comparative study. So Slovenia is far ahead from Ukraine in development of the culture of peace. You don't avoid a war. Yes, we have more than 10 years war. You had 10 days war, but still, it was a war. And why? Because militarized culture, politics, and economy generate wars. Mass killing of enemies and arms race could not bring peace. Only big changes towards knowledge-based, non-violent way of life could bring peace. And I emphasize knowledge-based because some people think it could be some sort of religion, but people with different religions, you know, are starting to kill each other. So we need knowledge, we need skills, practical skills of peace building, of reaching agreements, of mediation, and so on. And first of all, we need hope. We need hope for the world without wars and violence. We need to promote it and convincingly illustrate it, not only in textbooks, but we need more paintings showing that it is real to live with violence, not these Hollywood blockbusters, but peace movies, peace games, showing people interactively, adding experience of interactive, peaceful life. You know, gamification is future of education, especially peace education. And there are some attempts, but now, unfortunately, not very developed. We need it a lot. This hope for the world without wars and violence must be promoted and convincingly illustrated. And it starts from promotion of right to refuse to kill in time of war. It became issue, it became law, in particular in United Kingdom, in United States during wars, and it is great that democratic values in developed nations, in nations able to embrace common sense first of all, lead them to introduce restraints to militarism, such as democratic civilian control, such as democratic control on the level of imperative of individual conscience, giving people opportunity to vote by their heart instead of war. Because without that, people vote by their feet against the war, as we see on example of many brave anti-war activists and conscientious objectors in Russia. We need to promote right to refuse to kill in time of war, and we need to write it boldly in international law. Right to refuse to kill and hope for the world without wars. That should be our lesson for the world, able to change. Thank you.